Okay, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately your time is up. Your time is up, so I'll be coming round, and this is like a school examination. Put your pens and papers down. So I'll start with table number 1, optimizing throughput at rail yards. I don't even think this was an issue. I think this was easy, but let's see what was discussed, and I hand over to Bob Farrell. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Louis. The panel has decided the visibility has been really good from the railroad regarding information on what cars are coming in until it reaches the black hole at the rail yard, and things seem to fall apart. We need better visibility of the unloaded and inspected units when they're ready. It would really be assistance if the inspection companies could tell us that the vehicle is ready in real time. That would improve velocity. And also on the truck side, if we can in real time tell the railroad that a certain bay is empty when we've already taken the vehicle off the bay and put it on the truck. And if we could do an automatic out of gate with scanning, that would really be real time information and improve efficiency and flow. Louis?
Thank you very much. So hopefully that's going to solve every problem we've ever had with rail yards. And next, an even easier problem, security. What could possibly go wrong?
So we divided this into 3 different topics, and as you might guess, we never got beyond the first topic, which was actually physical security of the vehicle and the storage and rail transit. The other 2 areas that were discussed dealt with cybersecurity of the IT systems, and third, an emerging issue, which is the actual hacking of vehicles, which potentially lead to the stealing of vehicles while they're stored in these yards. But our focus was strictly on physical security, and in particular, the rail issue. And we didn't really come up with any kind of solutions in this area. The biggest suggestion was making sure that the vehicles continue to stay moving as much as possible. Most of the issues occurred during these interchange periods. And but we really didn't come up with any solution other than what's been tried in the past. Unless there's others in the group that would like to add something to that, but that's our report.
Thank you very much, Mike. And now on this table, artificial intelligence. And if ever there was a table that's full of artificial intelligence, but don't worry, I'm one step ahead of you guys. From real intelligence to artificial intelligence to me, no intelligence. But let's hear what was discussed here. Thank you, Zarif.
We've come to the conclusion that we live in the Matrix. None of this is real. And definitely take the red pill. No, we had a nice discussion, more so about the future and what artificial intelligence means to the industry. Who's using what kind of data? How are you learning from the data? And, you know, this is more of a conversation of just getting introduced to the concept and trying to figure out how we can augment all of this information in order to optimize our processes. We talked about marketing and how the information is being used there for sales in different OEMs. And we're very excited to see how the industry is going to transform.
Thank you very much, Zarif. And now, autonomous vehicles. When we did the survey earlier, I think about 50% of the audience said they were interested in autonomous vehicles. And I'm definitely one of them. So the sooner the better. Whether my first one will be a Neo or not, I don't know. Govin.
Yeah, thank you, Louis. I think we had a really wide range of cross-functional groups here. We had people from OEM, from road haulers, from the system standpoint, from the infrastructure, and the last mile delivery. We had freight forwarders, and we had a very, very diverse group here. So some of the things we broke it down into opportunities and challenges in different areas. We talked about, first of all, yard, right? If you have autonomy in the yard, how does it help? better space utilization. We can also test vehicles under controlled environment, and also we have so a lot of self-driving opportunity. And some of the challenges we have is updates to the facilities, and then if you have a hauler and stuff, how to secure vehicles to the hauler, also how to have proper weight distribution. But some of the other challenges we have is if we are using, how do we communicate to the vehicles, and how we transfer the ownership of the vehicle from one state, maybe from a 3PL to a dealer, or from OEM to a 3PL. Those kind of concerns we have. And in terms of road haulers driving on the road, autonomy does provide a lot of advantages, especially we talked about savings. I think some of the presentations that Brandon had this morning and what we think autonomy can do, but there's also some challenges we have. First of all is how does it affect the restricted driver hours, whether he's sleeping or awake while he's monitoring the autonomous self-driving truck going down a highway. And also some of the challenges that we have to overcome is if there's a DOT stop and things like that, how do we handle, or if there's an emergency that happens, how does the operator take control of it, or can it be controlled through a remote? And in emergency situations, how do we handle it? So those kind of situations remain. And but I think what we feel is from a standpoint of early implementation, definitely yard will be the best place for us to improve some kind of a controlled autonomous driving opportunity. And then move it forward, next step to road haulers, and then the last mile, where I think based on the infrastructure in the city and urban area we are in, there's opportunity to implement. And one thing that we have to keep in back of our mind, hopefully with the advent of this technology, we would maybe see the reduction in the cost of the autonomous hardware and software, because right now it might be cost prohibitive in many areas to implement autonomy in trucks. But as we know, as I heard about a week ago, the Velodyne has slashed its LiDAR cost to $4,000. At one time it was $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. Now the LiDAR is $4,000. So as there are more people get on board, I think the cost will stabilize and we'll see opportunities. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Very interesting discussion. So autonomous logistics might be closer than autonomous finished cars. So there we're looking at optimizing or rethinking a vehicle logistics network. So I'll hand over to Christoph from CFR Rinkins. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have to say it was a little bit difficult to do this think tank with 3 tables, just too far apart and a lot of noise. So thank you to everybody for still making it work. As at every conference, I think the consensus is that the key issue of the challenge of optimizing the networks and rethinking it is that generally there's just a lack of information sharing between primarily the OEMs, but within the industry as a whole. And as Toyota put it so eloquently, it's the fear of sharing too much that will prevent that from ever really changing. What I took away from this discussion are a couple of key points. The only way that the networks will improve, especially when it comes to matching up capacity with production, is by more visibility throughout the outbound chain. Technology is clearly the solution for that. One interesting point that was brought up is, for example, in LA with the lack of warehousing and yard space, that a new model, for example, has sprung up, sort of the Uber for warehouse space and yard space, where providers or people that need space, yard space and warehouse space, can actually use an Uber-type technology to get access to space on shorter notice. I thought it was really fascinating. We have Alan from Antich Logistics from China here at the table, and Antich is the largest logistics or outbound logistics company, finished vehicles in China. They move about 10 million vehicles a year. And he was mentioning that they have a control tower that controls those 10 million cars, but essentially just a core of 12 people managing it. Is that correct? which is quite amazing if you think about it. And the reason he's giving why that is possible is that they essentially own most of the assets along the chain. So they own the trucks, they own rail cars, they own ships, and most importantly, they have their own technology that passes information throughout that chain, which obviously gives them a huge advantage of being able to manage large volumes of cars when they control the assets and the information. And then us Americans rightfully mentioned that Chinese have a little bit of an advantage. Their infrastructure is a lot newer than ours, so they could basically start fresh and start new, whereas the US infrastructure is so old and you know, it's a mess basically, and it's going to be tough to unsort that. So we didn't come to a good solution. Okay.
Thank you very much, Christoph. And now the next table is optimizing network design. So go to Lindsay. Thank you, Lindsay.
So our table talked about optimizing network design with a focus right now, timely discussion about how to optimize during times of disruption. We talked a lot about what the triggers are for doing network design studies, and the conclusion was that for the most part it seems that network design is limited to contract renewal times. There's sort of daily network decisions occurring as part of our daily operational calls, but not like a strategic network design occurring on a frequent basis. Other triggers can be market changes, the weather, any kind of historic event. We know winter happens every year. Anything that can be modeled similarly that's predictable, new vehicle launches, stuff like that you're going to have quality holds around. Equipment and driver shortages are a good opportunity to do network design studies, and of course the daily sort of micro redesign decisions that are made. We talked about whether or not there were opportunities to improve the network and what those are, and we agreed that there are definitely opportunities, although there's challenges to actually achieving some of that gain. So some of the opportunities were between the OEMs themselves, so consolidating low-running routes to be able to ship vehicles more quickly, the use of mixing yards to be able to consolidate and build volume. We talked about opportunities between OEMs and vendors to collaborate more, so where there's opportunities for a two-way haul for a truck carrier, where the OEM can provide more higher quality forecast information and further in advance forecasts so that the vendors can plan around the volume. And we actually had the opportunity to discuss with someone from our group that came from the parts side how a lot of these things are actually already occurring in parts, which led us into the call to action for suppliers and the OEMs to work together to identify those opportunities, and how some of the challenges between OEMs around sort of antitrust and cost decisions and everything means they can't easily call each other and share network design information. But if a provider approaches them about an area where they see waste or opportunity, that might be the right way for us to all collectively learn and share that information.
Thank you. And now we're going to be looking at connecting the connected car. So over to Hartmut from Inform. Thank you, Hartmut.
Thank you, Louis. So it has already been mentioned that visibility of the cars in the supply chain is of essence for multiple aspects. So we limited ourselves to the logistics aspects of connecting cars. By that, not ignoring that it has a huge value in aftermarket and other applications, consumer applications, to get better experience with the car, a more seamless experience. But we, so to say, limited ourselves to the more logistics aspects like telematics, the car says where it is, the car sends diagnostic information, and the like. So the question is, who should have access to that information? It's clear that on the one hand, everybody wants to have access to that information, while there is also the said frightenness to share that information with everybody, so that probably the OEM would control who gets what information and also compare that information to a plan and just not put it out, but also say, this means that it's late, this means that you are well in time. So generating events and alarms from that will play a role, so it's not only the location or only the diagnostic information that generates the value. So, and then looking into the question, why didn't it happen yet? Why isn't that there? Yeah, if the technology is there. This brings somebody, or that brought to the discussion to, let's say, the elephant in the room, which is who pays for it and who has the benefit. So, starting with the benefits, it's the big dream of becoming more independent of EDI. That was a big yes in the very heterogeneous group with really people from all parties. Then to avoid waste by getting information earlier than today. If something is delayed, no blame, we just want to know. This kind of early planning. Then less chasing, while it was difficult to put an effort behind the chasing. Everybody wants to get rid of that chasing, but it seems to be difficult to quantify. Then an interesting aspect came up that getting this kind of information will most likely reduce car touches. So starting with long-term stock maintenance, touching the car just to find out that the battery is still fine, yeah, can be avoided. Removing snow of a car just to find out that the battery is still fine, yeah, with all the scratches, all the walking. So reducing car touches will be a tangible benefit of that technology. And last but not least, dealers will be able to provide additional information to their customers walking around a yard. When they know which car is sitting where, they can display information on that car to the end customer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hartmut. And now, in a way, what the conference is all about, I suppose, the need to connect and collaborate. So I'll hand over to Paul Nurse from ProAct. Thank you.
Thanks, Louis. Yeah, need to collect and collaborate. The first thing really we talked about was where the problem primarily was. Is it a technological problem or is it a political problem? Or a technical problem? And I think probably we largely agreed that it was probably more political than technical these days. The technology is there to allow us to collaborate, but most of the problems are really incentive and the politics of communicating. Other issues or other challenges, many of the service providers are sometimes often the OEM might insist that particular systems are used, OEM systems are used to manage pieces of the supply chain. So when that particular service provider is possibly managing many different manufacturers through single yards, ports, or whatever other operations, then having to use other systems can often basically complicate the issue for that service provider, put more overhead on, and ultimately decrease the opportunity to collaborate with other service providers. Changing the culture, again, there is more technology, there's more devices that allows us to have better communication and collaboration, but changing the culture of possibly drivers or anybody else that's operating technology in the field is another problem, training, education, incentive to do that. The thing that came up a lot of time was a missing sort of point of reference, a central point of reference. We mentioned just over there a minute ago a control tower. So something, someone, some entity that can bring all the different players together, because there was still a view that to a large extent the relationship between a service provider and the OEM in terms of collaboration is slightly different between a service provider and a service provider. Service providers may still, to some extent, operate as silos, and the incentive to provide more information than's needed to the next person down the chain or the next person up the chain. Where the incentive is, there are extra costs potentially in doing that. So I think we talked about maybe a need for a slightly different viewpoint of how service providers communicate with each other and the incentive and the benefits of doing that to the overall supply chain. In fact, we made the point here with 2 or 3 different port operators that none of those port operators actually have any kind of interface or integration to each other today. We also talked about the type of information, about too much information, so is a problem. Too much noise, giving sometimes the customer, the dealer, whoever it might be, too much information, too much precise information about what's going on. Sometimes basically causes then that person to try and manage the service provider, and then it causes more complexity. So too much information was one issue. And on the other side, not enough information. And we've got certain service providers who are basically having to embellish the information they have to give to the next service provider down the chain that needs more additional information to actually move on. So basically, a lot of this came back to standardization of the overall data set that we're using to manage the supply chain. We talked a little bit about blockchain, and probably the opinion was still a little bit skeptical, watch this space kind of view. Possibly still a lot of hype, possibly still issues with the technology itself in terms of scalability. Certainly has its uses, but whether it's scalable enough to work at a large and global level is in question at the moment. One of the potential benefits that was seen was cash flow. So that was one of the positives. And also, we talked a little bit about the changing sales channels, more online ordering, and whether that would change the type of collaboration needed. Finished off finally just with basically around the table, just to get one word from everybody really that summarized what collaboration was about. And basically they came down to cash flow, smooth operation, improved efficiency, co-investment, which was an interesting one, trust. Again, that came up a few times in the discussions. Agility, adaptation to events, to a dynamic environment. And then standardization, which again was another thing that came up many different times during the conversations. And finally, transparency. So we try not to hide things now. We know we need enough transparency. We need enough positivity in the supply chain to show everybody what's going on and not be afraid to let everybody know the true picture. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. So I think that's all the think tanks covered. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope that you get good value from them. Please continue the discussions, and if we can help in any kind of way, if there's anything that came through that you felt should be continued, should be grown, should be covered in our conferences, covered in our magazines, or anything we can do to continue the discussions that were had here, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to do that. But we will be collecting the information from the think tanks and sharing them with the whole groups as well. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the discussions. So we'll see you back here at 4 o'clock for another great session looking at leadership and inspiring the automotive or finished vehicle logistics industry. So enjoy your coffee and see you back at 4 o'clock.